All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Dobler. I'm chair of the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition. We are here today to talk about an exciting topic for me. It's a little wonky, a little nerdy, but I love this stuff. These are policy changes that are going to help us address stormwater, and this legislation is going to be focused primarily on impervious surface and stormwater. Brief background: the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition is a coalition of volunteers working collaboratively with government agencies, academic institutions, businesses, nonprofits, and individuals dedicated to advocating solutions for a healthy and resilient Biscayne Bay watershed. And today's conversation is going to be around a piece of legislation that originated in the Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board, in which I serve on behalf of the community, holding a representative seat for the community. So I introduced this legislation at the Watershed Management Advisory Board, and it passed the full Board of County Commissioners in 2022. This resolution proposed 5 things. One is to develop proposed changes to county code with respect to operations and maintenance of municipal stormwater systems. 2 is to develop new standards for design and construction of municipal stormwater systems. 3 is to conduct educational and outreach campaigns. 4 is to expand the county's asset management system to include stormwater infrastructure. And 5, recommending that the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners urge DEP to strengthen requirements and increase auditing and enforcement of the NPDES permits for municipal stormwater systems. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Marina Pape Blanco, who is the Division Director of Water Management for RER DERM at the county. And so I'm going to let her share a presentation on some really hard work that they've been doing and the proposed code changes, and let her talk about what they have been working so hard and diligently on. Marina, I've given you screen share controls. Are you able to share? Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Maybe you can introduce yourself and anybody else from DERM who's on, and walk us through this, and we will try to save some time for some Q&A. We can see your screen.
Several members of my group are unable to sign in. They're having sign-in problems.
They have to be authenticated, so they have to be logged into Zoom in order to access. It may have been a mistake in my selecting that, but we didn't want anybody to Zoom bomb.
Hi, Dave. It's Lourdes Gomez with RER, and I'm really sorry I was late. I had the same issue that I think Omar just communicated. So I don't know if Marina.
Marina's on. Marina
Grossenbacher is not. Laura Eldridge, maybe.
Marina, are you able to speak? You look like you're unmuted, but I don't hear you.
Laura said she's here.
All right.
The chat.
Marina, we cannot hear you if you're speaking. We still cannot hear you, Marina.
I would recommend, this is Rodney Carrero Santana from the town of Bay Harbor Islands. I would recommend that she just call in and use the screen.
Yeah, she's done that for other meetings. Let me see if I can reach her separately. Hold on.
Sorry for the delay getting started, everybody.
All right. Let's, all right. Let's see if I can. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. So let's see if we can move on, right? Apologize for all the distraction. Let's see here. I'm going to lower my sound a little better. Okay. All right. So we wanted to share with you. Hang on one second. I got earphones, so I'm going to take them off. You don't have an echo, do you?
No, you sound quite good.
Okay. All right. So we wanted to share with you some of the regulatory updates that we've been working on, and we plan to take to the county commission for adoption later in the fall. And the general theme for the updates is to provide comprehensive improvements that relate to how we manage stormwater countywide, both for single properties as well as in the public right of way. I think everyone received a couple of files with Dave's meeting invite. That one has the whole draft over the ordinance, and the second one has the presentation that I'm showing here on the screen. So I will just go through the highlights of what the changes are that we are proposing. The key updates actually change language in chapters 24 and 33 of the county code. The ordinance will allow us to do a number of things. It will make some of the existing requirements more explicit. It will update some of the data references that we normally would like engineers to use in their analysis, design, assessments. And it would also add a number of new requirements. The updates in general can be grouped into 4 key areas. And I'll start with a presentation sort of summarizes the updates based on those key areas. The first one is on page 3, and it talks about best management practices. We have recognized that it's very important for us to actually preserve pervious areas. And this is becoming especially critical when you deal with residential properties, especially family and townhomes, which over time tend to have or to show extreme reduction in the pervious areas, or pervious areas that were there originally get significantly damaged. For example, swales in front of homes. So to this end, we're proposing to require review of all impervious area improvements that are proposed for single family and townhomes. All the other property types and project types we normally, or the municipalities or the county gets to review. But single family and townhomes, sometimes when there is no building permit, does not go through any review at the present time. We have also included a path forward for municipalities. So when they already have similar code requirements or higher code requirements, they can continue to do those reviews and inspections. Otherwise, the county takes over the responsibility of the review and inspection. We're also including language that allows the county to follow up when there is flooding or there's water quality violations, regardless of any approvals that may have been issued, whether it's by the county or a municipality. We're also requiring that any modification, development, construction of a stormwater infrastructure be reviewed by the county. And this is already required when water, wastewater, and air facilities are present. So all we're doing is we're adding a stormwater infrastructure to that list as well. The following this grouping cover pages, we have in the presentation that was distributed to you, we have the key sections of the code, and highlighted are the key changes, additions, etc. The next grouping of requirements has to deal with addressing maintenance and operation requirements. And that is on page 6 of the handout. We're looking for owners and operators of a stormwater management systems that serve the public right-of-way or private systems that discharge onto the public right-of-way to provide copies of all of their infrastructure inventory and maintenance records. These are records that should be available for municipal systems already because they have an MPDS permit and therefore they're required to inspect and provide information to the state on an annual basis. And the idea is that those records be shared with us so that we can better address emergencies when there is flooding conditions or water quality issues. And so we can also improve on the stormwater regional planning for future improvements. Following this page, we have the same structure. We're showing key sections that are being changed and what are the key changes that we're proposing. These, by the way, are requirements that all apply countywide. The third grouping of changes deals with stormwater system performance, and they start on page 9 of the handout. And what we're doing is we're proposing that stormwater systems be certified. This certification is to be done by an engineer based on a system assessment to make sure that the system performs as intended and that it's not causing any flooding or water quality issues. The assessment is also supposed to determine if there is any corrective actions or improvements that may be needed and set a timeline for implementation. In the code, we're including the authority by the county that if corrective actions are not implemented timely, or there are flooding or water quality violations that are observed, that the cycle for recertification of the system may be shortened, so maybe less than 10 years. We're proposing in the onset that the certification will occur the first time within 3 years of the adoption of the ordinance and every 10 years thereafter. Lastly, on page 12, we summarize some of the key standard updates that we're proposing. We are proposing retention requirements, and we do have retention requirements today. We have the cut and fill areas with 100-year storm event retention. We have developments, subdivisions, anywhere where the district permits are required. There is a 25-year event retention requirement, but we are proposing to have very explicit retention requirements of a minimum of 10 years for all parcels, single lots, and regardless of the size. We're also introducing the idea that using green infrastructure is a strategy that can be considered towards meeting the retention requirements. We have introduced a minimum permeability factor, and we're opening the door to using new permeable materials that are very available in the market today, as long as the permeability rate is confirmed by the manufacturer. And we're also expanding the permeability to the types of soil that can be used as well. And lastly, we're introducing minimum water quality standards that will be related to the discharges that may be allowed. And that is direct discharges onto canals as well as directly into the bay. No debris or waste is to be accepted. And if new outfalls are proposed, we actually have a higher retention requirement that needs to be provided for that parcel before the outfalls can be approved. This is a 60-page ordinance change. So obviously there is a lot that goes into it. We are really making presentations. We've met with building officials from municipalities, their floodplain managers. We made presentations to the Biscayne Bay Advisory Board. We made presentations to the League of Cities. We're talking to the building industry. We're talking to you today. So we're really looking for any and all comments that you can provide, with the idea that we will have the best thought out language that we can to going to the BCC, hopefully for first reading in September. And we'll have to go to their committee and then full BCC for adoption after that. And with that, I'm open to any kind of comments, questions. On the last page of the presentation, you have an email that you can use to provide comments to us, watermanagement@miamidade.gov. And even though we say July 31st, we are actually extending comments to be received by August 7th, if at all possible. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marina. I just want to point out that these changes are really being directly addressing key components of the Biscayne Bay Task Force, which our Chief Bay Officer, Arela Begay, was instrumental in creating a number of years ago. And I'm putting those in the chat, which ones this actually addresses. And so I've asked a number of questions directly, but I'm very curious to hear from the crowd here. Does anybody have any questions or looking for clarifications? If you can raise your hand, that'd be great. Marina, while we're waiting for some questions, I do have a question. This is going to be requiring engineer certification and demonstration that the municipalities are meeting the requirements. What kind of engineer is going to be required for certification, and how do we ensure quality work?
What we're requiring in terms of the certification needs to be signed and sealed. So typically what happens is you will have, more than likely would be a civil engineer. It has to be somebody who has the professional experience and credibility and credentials to be able to do the assessment. However, depending on what kind of elements of the infrastructure, they could involve other specialties in engineering. For example, it could be a structural, it could be mechanical, depending on which parts of the system need to be evaluated and reported on.
David Chin, you have raised your hand. Please unmute and ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Marina. I just have a quick question on the retention requirement. So you mentioned it's a 10-year event. Is there a storm duration associated with that?
I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, you said the 10-year event, and I didn't catch what you said after that.
Is there a duration associated with that? Like a 10-year, 24-hour event, for example?
Yes, that would typically be the 10-year, 24-hour for the small lots. Understanding that when you read the draft ordinance, you will see what kind of other requirements, which are higher than a 10-year event, we're making depending on a number of characteristics for that property. But for the small lots, it would be a 10-year, 24-hour.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, hi.
Hi, my name is Obey. I'm with the FIU Sea-Level Solution Center. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I have a question. There's a lot of talk about extremes, particularly sub-daily durations increasing due to climate change. Is there any discussion on how to account for that, design for these for future conditions?
Actually, when you look at the draft changes and other changes that we've already made, we got some adopted back in October. There are, for example, when it comes to a storage in the secondary canal system, and any kind of changes that a project may be causing on the conveyance system, the updates or improvements that need to be made are to a 2060 scenario. Likewise, the county flow criteria that was just adopted last past October is actually requiring a 10-year, 24-hour storm event for a 2060 scenario. And when you read the draft of the ordinance, we're also making mention of, in terms of the groundwater component, that we're looking at an analysis made with current as well as future condition, and we give sources, data sources to be used as well.
Thank you.
And because they're just popping up alphabetically, and I don't know who raised their hand first, Ansley, please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. I have two hopefully quick questions. One, in the section of the new proposed rules, I think it's section 24-24.1, there were two things I just wanted understand a little better. One subsection of that new rule talks about existing stormwater infrastructure for which no prior approval exists. I was just sort of wondering how, if the county feels like you have a pretty good idea of that existing stormwater infrastructure and how you would know about what stormwater infrastructure you know about and what you might not know about, and sort of how you get information about previously unpermitted stormwater infrastructure. And then my second question was sort of about enforcement related to sort of record submission and recertification of stormwater management systems. You talk about that in the event of some problem, you identify deficiencies and recommend corrective actions and a timeline by which such corrective actions will be accomplished. I was just interested in a little more detail on sort of what that follow-up would look like and how you envision enforcement happening to ensure these systems are documented and the required information is submitted and problems resolved. Thank you.
Well, I guess you're interested in what happens with municipal systems or, systems that serve the public right away, correct?
Sorry, I was getting, yes.
Okay. The way the certification and recertification is envisioned, we recognize that a number of systems may have been existent for a very long time. Some of it may have been done with permits. Maybe some of it was done without permits, the modifications that were made. So the first thing that we're doing is we're taking the approach of the certification in that regardless of any records that exist within the first 3 years of the ordinance being adopted, then the owners and operators of those systems will then get the services of an engineer to do an engineering analysis of the entire system. That analysis should include research on what permits exist or don't exist. But regardless of that, the assessment of the system needs to be made, the condition of the system needs to be determined, and if improvements are necessary, then those improvements have to be planned. And then that is what gets submitted to us, improvements, corrective actions, and with what the implementation timetable would look like. We analyze and we agree with let's say as a municipality, in that that's the plan of action, and then we follow up with a municipality to be able to make sure that it's implemented. That is the concept.
So there's a lot of responsibility that lies with the municipality in terms of getting the right contractor, developing its plan, and following up with you.
There is a lot of responsibility that lies with the owner and operator of the system, yes.
Marina, I have a follow-up question on that. If I heard you correctly, we have a lot of infrastructure that was developed, and built 60s, 70s, and 80s before a lot of modern day pollution controls existed. How will these requirements help bring those old and antiquated systems with inferior pollution control systems? How will this help bring those up to, I don't want to say up to code, but how will this help bring them up to a modern day pollution control, quality of service?
What we're doing here, we've prefaced it by saying that we're interested in really enforcing the system performance. Now, let's say the system has an element of direct discharges. If those direct discharges are causing a water quality issue and are adversely impacting the water quality of the receiving body, then that assessment that we're introducing here as part of the certification would show that and would propose what improvements are needed to correct that issue. That's why if you look at what we're proposing, it's really based on the system performance, and that's really what we want to enforce.
So basically, however they plan on achieving the water quality goals, they can do it however they want, as long as they are meeting the water quality goals?
That's right. That's right. The whole idea is that we don't necessarily go in and micromanage how an owner or operator of a system goes about doing what they do. However, the system has to perform according to what it needs to and cannot cause flooding or water quality issues.
And currently the county is doing the water quality testing, the surface water quality testing. Will the county know which outfalls or which infrastructure is not performing and meeting water quality standards, or is that going to be left up to the municipalities to figure out?
The responsibility of determining what is working and what is not working within a system is that owner's or operator's responsibility. Independently from that, you're correct. The county does water quality sampling. We don't necessarily go out and sample each and every single outfall, for example, unless there is, we're following up on a compliance issue. But it's supposed to work independently to verify what's going on and what we receive from the cities as well. And there is nothing preventing us from going further to investigate what is happening in a general area.
Excellent. Next on my screen, I have Luis Rodriguez. Luis, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Marina. Thanks so much for your presentation. And I'm also a member of the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition. And one of my greatest concerns and issues for many, many years have been the pollution of Biscayne Bay by land-based debris. So I heard you saying that these new amendments will prohibit, will how do I say, will work to prohibit the marine debris from entering Biscayne Bay. So my question, forgive me for my question here, but my main concern is, will the county state-specific pollution control strategies to be installed on storm drains to avoid land-based debris from entering Biscayne Bay, or will that be up to each municipality as well?
There's many ways and many strategies that can be used to make sure that the stormwater is treated properly, filtered properly, to then have the level of quality in terms of debris or other nutrients or pollutants before it gets discharged. So we're not fixing what strategy can be used, and generally speaking, it's probably going to be a combination of a number of strategies, right? Some of it may be resolved with just a different maintenance cycle. Some of it may be resolved by introducing the construction of pollution control structures prior to an outfall. Some may be by increasing stormwater storage, retention, and reducing the volumes that are directly discharged. So the strategy or combination of strategies that is used, we're not fixing that. We're leaving that to the owner and operator. What we're doing is we're fixing the system performance. Ultimately, it doesn't matter to us how something is done as long as we get the flood control that we need and the water quality that we need. And we're not negatively impacting the receiving water body.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right, Rachel, Miami Waterkeeper, you're up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Dave, thanks for organizing, and Marina and DERM team, thanks for doing this for everybody. It's really great to hear everything explained this way. I just had a question. Well, I have a couple questions. I'm trying to pick which one's the most urgent here, but Marina, you said a couple things. One is to make sure it doesn't impact the receiving waterway. How will that be determined? And then also, do you have a sense of how many existing properties in the county are, I know this is not gonna apply to them, but how many properties that are already built would in theory comply with this level of impermeability or not? And do we have a sense of, you know, how pervious are our surfaces so far in the county, and how much work do we have to do?
Okay, in terms of the receiving bodies, Rachel, if you read when you read the ordinance, you'll see that we're saying it could be any of the secondary canals or primary canals or the bay. It doesn't matter. Eventually, if it's discharged onto a canal that discharges onto the bay, then you have the ultimate, potentially the ultimate damage, right? So one of the things that we're also doing is that we're proposing that for any new outfall, that retention be increased before a new outfall is approved. So we're controlling the quality of the discharge, but we're also saying we're trying to make it a little bit harder, a higher standard before a new outfall is approved, or a new outfall is permitted, you know, a request comes in to be permitted, right? So we're trying to approach it from that way.
I guess I'm wondering, Marina, sorry, go ahead.
In terms of systems, if you look county-wide, I think almost about half of the county area that is developed has some sort of outfall system. That doesn't mean that it's 100% direct discharge, right? That there's probably a combination of some infiltration and then direct discharges. The other half of the areas don't even have direct outfalls, so are not depending on direct discharges, right? What we're saying now again is that to permit a new outfall, you would need to increase retention. So whatever was there before, it should be reducing, you know, the volumes of direct discharges should be reduced.
Okay, that's helpful, Marina, thank you. And just going back to my first question of how to measure whether or not it's impacting the receiving waterway, like, is that water quality standards? How far from the outfall will you measure? What kind of metrics will that entail? How often will that be measured?
Yeah, we have some criteria in the code, but we're also, and you'll see this mentioned several times in the ordinance, that both for flood control purposes and water quality improvement purposes, we are stipulating that anything that is going to be constructed, improved, you know, remodeled, etc., there has to be proof that conditions after the project is completed are better, the same, or better than before. So we're trying to make sure that whatever gets done, conditions are not adversely impacted. And we're doing that both with the water quality as well as the water quantity.
Okay, thanks, Marina.
Hey, okay, Rodney, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, and this was pertaining to the different types of year and the year requirements and the time requirements. It was a 10-year storm, and but I've worked with different municipalities, and they have different requirements, and a lot of times stricter than the county. So would the I guess the developer need to, I'm assuming that they need to be able to go to that requirement instead of the lesser requirement because it's stricter. Is this correct, Marina?
That is absolutely correct. If a municipality has a stricter requirement, we welcome that. We're not asking to reduce that requirement.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, Rodney.
Yeah, and then one last thing also is that when the engineer reviews a stormwater system that has been in place. And you indicated that he has to provide that evaluation. Now, that evaluation could be of what form besides, because I've spoken with many engineers and they have indicated that, there is no way of really determining unless he was the engineer who installed the system and unless he can determine that the system has been maintained as installed. Do you have any recommendations, Marina?
Well, regardless of any records that exist or don't exist, right? Any engineer can go in and assess the system, do a field physical inspection. That's done very often. I mean, I've done that myself many times over. So regardless of the maintenance, let's talk about, for example, a catch basin or a manhole. The manhole is open. If it hasn't been maintained, it may be full of debris, for example.
Correct.
Then it gets cleaned, and then you can verify, you can take the dimensions of that manhole or the pollution control structure, for example. The systems can be cleaned, and then you can verify, piping sizing, conditions, infiltration capability or rate conditions. So any system, if it hasn't been maintained, can be cleaned out and then assessed and determine what sizes of the infrastructure has, and then use that for calculations. Elevations of invert piping, invert elevations and manholes and catch basins, structures. So regardless of, if records exist, that's great. But if they don't, then it just takes a physical assessment.
Right. Maria Lesday, she's our town manager. She also had a follow-up question. Maria? And I guess she's not. Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rodney, did you need me to say something?
No, it's just if you had a follow-up.
No, I was just listening to what you're saying.
Okay, all right,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right, Elizabeth, do you have any questions? Please raise your hand or please unmute yourself and ask.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Marina, and the whole DERM team. I just had a question about how, I reviewed the ordinance, but just generally speaking, how you see these changes impacting municipality infrastructure maintenance and operations versus the county's own infrastructure maintenance and operation, and how, and if at all, it applies differently or will change the county's management and improvements to the infrastructure.
I'm not sure that I understand what you're asking. Can you repeat that again?
Sure. I'm just wondering if this will apply. We're talking a lot about the new regulations and requirements of municipalities, but I was hoping you could talk about the applicability of this to the county's own infrastructure operations and maintenance, if at all.
Yeah, we foresee this applying to any and all the infrastructure systems that serve the right of way. It doesn't matter whether it's owned and operated by the county, a municipality, special taxing districts, whatever, CDDs, whatever it may be.
So approval, it goes through the county, for the county's own operations and upgrades as well.
Yes, but we have different groups within the county. For example, the water management division, we handle, let's say, all of the improvements on the secondary canals. To do that, we actually are required to have a Class 3 permit, just like anybody else. So I know Marcel is from water control, he's on the line. So we submit sign and seal plans to water control, and we obtain a Class 3 permit. So we see this, we operate this way now. for, county-owned infrastructure, we still have to obtain the required permits.
So do you anticipate this being a big change in the way that the county is currently operating, or I guess that's kind of where my question was going to.
I'm not sure why it would be impacted. I mean, we would have to certify it and assess our systems the same way.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Marina, I have just maybe you can or cannot answer this. With 33 co-permittees on our current MS4 permit or who have MS4 permits, what percentage do you think would be able to today meet the goals of this that would pass without any significant improvements required?
In essence, for example, the requirement of submittal of asset information is something that they should all be able to do. They all have NPDES permits. They're required to inspect their system, maintain it, etc. Realistically speaking, probably 2/3 of them do have that. Some of the smaller municipalities sometimes have less resources, staffing and otherwise, and may have a little bit more work to be done before doing this. But that's where we're actually saying the certification requirement would be within 3 years of the adoption of the ordinance. So there should be sufficient time to be able to cash what's needed, have an assessment done, etc.
Excellent. And we have one more question from Maji. If you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, this is Maggie Ramos, and I live in Morningside. This is actually my first meeting. I guess my second. I was on a meeting last week. Well, first and foremost, Marina, and everybody from DERM, I want to thank you for the support for our newly minted rookery. We're super excited about that. It's an island where birds roost right off of Morningside Park. But we're really concerned with all of the excessive heat. We've been monitoring the bay, and it's not looking good. I actually spoke on this at the City of Miami commissioners meeting last week. It's pretty serious. We've got some fish kill. And then, of course, because everything is so stressed, now that we're having these rains, this is going to cause a really bad situation potentially. In addition to that, we have flooding in certain areas of our neighborhood, and especially in the park, which was caused, sadly, by, I'm not even sure who did this, but there have been like sidewalks and tennis courts built over drain fields. And so they're trying to correct the sidewalks. I actually got that through City of Miami. But now we're in the middle of a project where they're going to build a seawall, a very tall seawall. My concern, and nobody's really even talking about this, but my big concern is flooding in the park. And so last week in the meeting, they were talking about having a plan, like we have a hurricane, preparedness plan every year. We need a wet season plan. And so this isn't my idea. I don't want to take credit for this, but basically, maybe people that have septic tanks that are on waterways need to empty their septic tanks before rainy season. And maybe at that same time, start, like a whole checklist of items to do, maybe like clear all the drain fields, clear all the manholes, start getting rid of some of the debris, just prepare for rainy season so that we minimize the drainage into the bay. Have you thought about it? Is there any plan for this on your end?
We actually, we had a workshop in June with all the municipalities, building officials, floodplain managers, public works, staff, etc. And one of the topics was the impervious ordinance, but another topic was preparedness and what we could do to work together with the municipalities. What do we normally do, the county does, pre-storm, pre-rainy season, and how we could actually, what technical assistance we could offer to the municipalities to be able to better prepared. And a heavy emphasis was actually on how do we respond to rain events. Obviously, every municipality has their own stormwater utility. They have their dedicated funding, and they have their dedicated authority on what, how they control flooding and water quality. But that was the main topic of discussion. And it's the second year that we do that, actually. We had done it the 2022 as well. So that's something that preoccupies us very much. And we would definitely, were willing and able to really work with the municipalities or any of the other groups. You're welcome to contact me, and we would definitely have that discussion. For example, some municipalities, because of their conditions, they may have to use temporary pumping to be able to resolve flooding conditions.
Yeah,
One thing that we recommend is to have a pre-approved plan. Where can those pumps be installed? Where can discharge be sent to, right? So that we don't have to just respond in an emergency on the last minute. So
But doesn't that
many
only,
things that we can go.
but doesn't that water just go out to the bay when
Well,
they're
depends.
pumping it up?
Depends. It depends.
Okay.
It depends on location. I mean, you're thinking of what's on the coastal areas. I mean, there's conditions that happen inland as well, right?
Oh, of course.
So,
Mhm.
But
No,
what we propose is to discuss these things ahead of time, have a plan of action already approved, to be able to handle these conditions.
But maybe also, announce it to the public, like make it part of the plan every year. Because I mean, listen,
Yes.
I think we're going to have excessive heat. I think this is not really going to get better, or I hope it does, but it's looking
Yes.
like this might be the new normal. And so we need to,
Education
Right.
is a big piece, of course, yes.
and then maybe like, with these, the big concern, I think, for the coastal communities are, or even the waterfront communities are those homes that are on septics, some of these septic tanks are really old.
Yes.
And maybe like those homeowners maybe they can not use their laundry or something as frequently, or during a hard rain, where it's flooding already, or something, there may be things like that. I mean, I don't think anybody really realizes the impact of their water usage, just their, regular everyday water usage, and how it affects everything.
I agree. I think that we're also looking at what can be done and where in terms of conversions of septic to sewer.
Yeah, for
Again,
sure.
that's, it's not as straightforward.
No, that's a
because-
long-term project. We need a fast solution, because, right, I mean, the pictures we took of the bay a few days ago, there was like dead fish bubbling. It looked very, very stressed. Like, I'm almost scared to go out there because of all the rains we've had today.
Yeah, understood.
And one
Okay.
other question, just one more question, just a little separate thing. Because we're planning this shoreline project, and they're building this, in essence, it's a combination living seawall, and it's a new type of project that's never been done, where they're having like the existing seawall, so that's a natural one, and then building like a large sidewalk in essence. But my big concern is how, that's gonna create a flood pool, and it could flood out the neighborhood if we don't have proper drainage, and I'm not sure they're really dealing with that.
Well, I mean, anything that you do in the way of a seawall, yeah, depending on where it's at, you could have an issue with flooding upstream or behind it. Absolutely.
Right.
That needs to be
Right.
engineered properly, right?
Yeah, I'm involved in that. Yeah, I'm going to those meetings as well. I just wondered if you were involved in that in any way.
I am not. I'm not sure if Lisa is on the call. Maybe Lisa, if you are, you may have more information to provide.
And if not, maybe we can, that sounds like we might be getting a little off topic for the impervious
Yeah.
surface.
Yes,
So
thank you so much. Thank you
It's
for
a,
your
it's a,
time.
it's a great conversation. I don't know anything about the project you're talking about, but I'm very intrigued by it. And you can take a look at the Brittany Bay Park. I'll put a chat in the link.
Okay.
That might be interesting and might be helpful. We
Thank
had
you.
a question from Stephen Leitner.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this presentation. Speaking of impervious surfaces, what do we know about what our roadways contribute to nutrients and pollution in our bay? And could you discuss the impacts of roadways? And I believe they are off the table in terms of dealing with their runoff.
Well, clearly, if this impervious ordinance, we're being very clear about the fact that we're improving the standards both to control stormwater on private property as well as in the public right of way, and that those are the road systems that you're talking about. So the issues of the impact of the system performance that is used applies to the systems that protect the roads.
So runoff from roads will be monitored and cleaned up.
The systems, actually, the whole provision of asset inventory and maintenance records, as well as the certification process, applies to the systems that serve the road, that protect the roads, the drainage systems that protect the roads.
Encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, and Albert, you had a question. If you
apologize.
There you go. We
Yeah,
can
I
hear
was
you now.
muted. Yeah. So I was looking at two things right off the bat. I noticed that the rain totals per site, at least per referenced on Florida, in Florida off the Florida EPA standard, hasn't been changed since 1995. Given that our rain totals and rain, 100-year storm events have exponentially increased, and we have rain bombs now and everything, does the EPA or the governing body expect to increase the rain totals that the calculus is done based on collection per site? That's one question. I'll wait and see if I can get an answer, and then I'll ask a second question if you don't mind.
We just completed the update to the stormwater master plan models for the county, county-wide models. And we are definitely using the sea level rise projections from NOAA. We're using NOAA Atlas 14 for rainfall. So we are definitely using any and all current as well as forecasts that exist for rainfall, for sea level rise, as well as groundwater. And in fact, in the ordinance, that's one of the updates that we're making, in that we're proposing to use those types of data references or more up-to-date data references so that engineers can have access to that.
Given that the EPA or the DEP have not modified the statewide standard and we guide off the statewide standard, are we going to get into a preemption issue with this?
I don't think that we are, at least not at this point.
Okay. And then the other question I had was off-site compensatory treatment as an out for certain developments that don't have the space for on-site treatment. And I had some concerns there in that something very similar happens in city of Miami around their tree code when effectively they want to build a certain build of X size that is obviously a variance that they get and request. That eventually, probably at a tune of 100%, they get it in most cases. And if there's a 100, 200-year-old oak there, they pay into the fund and and then they're able to remove it, and that's that. And I'm wondering if the offsite compensatory treatment fund or fining or fund, fund that they would have to pay into to cover the cost of the offsite compensatory treatment is a way for people that want to build above the 40% standard and have approved some sort of variance for the particular property, that's their out. They can just pay into the compensatory fund, and then they don't necessarily need to follow the standard. Is there any guidances to say that people are actually required to follow this, as so long as we leave that offsite compensatory treatment clause in the ordinance?
The ordinance changes that we're calling the impervious ordinance. The requirements that we have for the retention, the requirements for the water quality purposes, all of these requirements are set without an allowance for any compensatory contribution.
So they would be required to abide by the set regulation and cannot offset, let's say, the regulatory standard by some sort of compensatory model.
In the case of retention, or the case of, we're strictly presenting to you the,
retention. Yes, you're right.
Right.
Retention and detention only. That's what I'm focusing on.
Right. There's no compensatory outlet for that.
Okay. That's thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay, everybody, thank you for staying with us over time. I allowed it to go over because we got a late start. So if anybody has any feedback. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to wrap this call up. Sorry, went over long. We got a late start due to some technical difficulties. So please send any written feedback and comments on the proposed code changes by August 7th. I imagine that's by the end of day. Is that correct, Marina?
That's fine. That's fine.
Wonderful. I put the email address in the chat. I'd like to thank DERM for coming and sharing with us their hard work and their efforts. It's a 63-page document, so there's a lot of stuff in there. Please read it, please review it, please submit any feedback, and thank you for everybody for joining us. Have a great day.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.